basically, there are 5 books that we know. There are 5 books in the Torah, right? So the first book is called Bereshis, which is Genesis. The second book is Shemais, which is Exodus. Then is Vayikra, is Leviticus. And then Bamidbar is in the desert, Numbers, and Devarim is Deuteronomy. And these 5 correspond to 5 stages of development. That the first stage of development is first that you're created, then you become part of a nation. This is the story. So first is the Genesis, then we became Exodus, became a people. Then in the third book we receive the law. That's the book of Leviticus. The book of Bamidbar is the story of the journey in the desert, and the book of Devarim is the end of the journey when we finally get into the destination. So it's actually a progression of these 5. But if you look a little bit deeper, in the book of Bamidbar itself, there is, in the middle of the third portion, there is, the story starts off in Bamidbar, the story starts off in Numbers, where the people are in the desert. There's the formation of the people, they're counting, there's the census, and which suggests that they're about to enter into the land. So there's the journey and then the destination, right? This usually happens first, the journey and then there's the destination. But something veers off course. And the way it's introduced is with 2 upside down, backwards letter Nun. So the letter Nun looks like this, and here you have a backwards one. So the letter Nun is like this on the top, and the backwards one is like this. So you have one Nun, and then you have another Nun at the end, and you have 2 verses in between. Actually, in the Torah scroll, you have these 2 letters, a backwards Nun, then there's 2 verses, and then there's another backwards Nun. Okay? I just wanted to show you that. And then, so we'll ask questions later. There's going to be a lot of complicated things. So we'll try to get through this information, then we'll ask all the questions. In the Torah itself, in the scroll of the Torah, if you look in the book, you open up the scroll, you'll see there's 2 backwards Nuns. And in between there are 2 verses in there. Now, generally the letter Nun, if you want to spell it, is spelled like this, which is a regular Nun, and then a final Nun. Okay? So one is curved, and one is straight. Okay, that's the only thing we have to know. And here we have 2 backwards Nuns, which is 2 curved Nuns. Now, what does this represent? So we have the story of the journey, Bamidbar, which is they leave Egypt, they receive the law, and they're journeying towards the land of Israel. This would be a smooth journey. However, things veer off course, and like we read in the Torah readings these couple of weeks, there's rebellions and there's story with the spies. There's many different things that didn't go that well, and because of that, they ended up in the desert for 40 years. So the way the Torah breaks the narrative is, first is a journey, which is that they're getting somewhere. There's a destination. Then there's a veering off course. And then finally there's a realignment. So it's introduced, this concept of movement, misalignment, and then realignment, breaks the book, divides the book of Bamidbar into 3. So you have the first part of the book of Bamidbar, the first part of the book of Numbers is the smooth transition, the smooth journey. Then these 2 opposite Nuns represents as a fall. The letter Nun stands for the word Nofel in Hebrew, which means to fall. And literally the structure of the Nun represents a person that's falling. His head is falling, and it represents downwards. This is also the reason why chapter 146 of the book of Psalms, which is a passage that we recite every day, which is called the Ashrei, it's an acrostic. Every single verse starts with another letter of the Hebrew alphabet. So the first verse starts with Ashrei, or Tila David, then Beis, Baruch Yoim, and Gadol Hashem, and Der V'Der. Everyone starts with another letter, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Daled. It has all the letters besides the letter Nun. There's no verse that starts with the letter Nun, because Nun represents Nefila, falling. That's generally. Now, when you have a Nun that's falling together with, and you spell out the Nun, so you have one letter that represents falling, and then the final Nun, the Nun, just so you should know, is like the letter N. N can be in the first beginning of a word, it can be the end of a word. When it's beginning of a word, it starts a word, or it can be in the middle of the word, And when it's a final nun, which is the long nun, it's always at the end of a word. Right? That's the conclusion of a word is with the final nun. The nun itself is spelled with two nuns. So here, in the Torah, we have two backwards nuns, but two regular nuns, which means falling after falling. There's a fall, and there's another fall, right? Because the head is bound. And this nun, the way the regular nun is, I will explain to you what this means. The regular nun is a fall, and then a getting up. Okay? So there's falling and then getting up. Which means that you veer off course, you have a life journey, you have a certain purpose, a certain goal that you want to achieve, you have a certain vision how you're going to achieve it, and then something unexpected happens. So you veer off course, and you fall. There's two options, obviously. The first option is that it completely takes you off course, and you forget about what your objective and what your trajectory is, and you're completely off course. The next thing you know, it's 5 years later, and you don't know how you got into this life. Or you have the final nun, which is the getting up nun. Now, the letter nun is also connected with the word nachash. Nachash means snake. Okay? Now, the word snake and the concept of the snake is what we find in the beginning of the story of Genesis, which is a story in the Garden of Eden, that the snake tempts man to eat from the tree of knowledge, which means that the snake demotes the human being from a place of the tree of life. Then the tree of life means a place of oneness and the absolute unity with everything, versus the tree of knowledge, which is awareness. And the basic difference is when you're aware that you're having an experience and you're separate from the experience. Any type of experience. If you're aware of yourself thinking, or you're aware of yourself enjoying an experience, or you're aware of yourself listening to music, then you're not really fully enjoying the music. The only way you really fully enjoy something is if there's no longer a you that's observing yourself having the experience. Right? And that's the difference between the tree of life, which is one, which means that we have an experience that's very deep and very real and very authentic, that there's completely no separation, versus an experience that's a tree of knowledge, which is awareness that there is a you that's observing yourself having the experience. So eating from the tree of knowledge, which eating is a metaphor for internalization, for bringing it into your body. So when they eat from the tree of knowledge, it represents that they're leaving the tree of life reality, and now they're observing themselves having the experience. That's considered a nefila, a fall. Okay. Now, the two letter nuns together in Hebrew, they also have a numeric value, every letter. So the numeric value of the letter nun is 50. Okay? When you have a nun and a nun, you have 100. Okay? I'm going to explain a little bit what this means. 50, the number 50 appears in the Torah a few times. And wherever the number 50 appears in the Torah, it represents total freedom. As if you're going up a scale or a ladder, and then when you reach the top of the ladder, that's the point of 50. For example, the famous example would be the idea of the Jubilee year, the Yovel year. The Jubilee year is you count 7 years, 7 times 7, that's 49. The 50th year is complete freedom, and the slave goes back to himself, and he's redeemed, and the land goes back to its owners, and everyone is in a state of perfect freedom. So 50 is a place where you reach that is freedom. Nun also means fish. Okay, it actually means nun yama, it means a fish. The letter nun can mean a fish. Now, what it represents in terms of reaching a certain plateau, it's when you're like a fish in water, moves about effortlessly, or at least it appears to us as it's effortlessly. So therefore, when you reach a certain spiritual plateau, a certain stage in your life, when you finally get it, you're swimming comfortably. So let's assume that you have a certain goal that you're setting up for your life. It could be a spiritual, a mental, a physical, emotional, whatever the goal that you're setting up for yourself, and the struggles, and you finally reach the top of you scale the peak, you reach the top of the point, and then you feel like, okay, this issue in my life is no longer a struggle. So let's say when you're younger, or you're in another condition, you struggle with one issue, and then you've mastered that issue, and you finally reach a place of no struggle. Okay? I'm not saying that you don't have struggle at all in your life, but with regards, correct, with this particular issue, you're swimming freely as a fish, which means that there's no conflict, there's no dichotomy. It's very easy. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper, and I'll try to understand what this is a little bit more. Nachash, snake, has the same numeric value as the word for Mashiach. Okay? Mashiach is the Redeemer. Redeemer, we're not only talking about the collective Redeemer, we're talking about the inner Redeemer, something that's perfect and whole and beyond all exile within ourselves. So Nachash represents that. Mashiach, we know that there are two forms of Mashiach, two expressions of Mashiach, or Messiah. There is Mashiach ben Yosef, and there's Mashiach ben David. There's Mashiach from the house of David, and there's Mashiach from the house of Joseph. These are two Mashiachs. Now Yosef and David belong to the tribes of Yehuda and Yosef, right? David is in the house of Yehuda, and Yosef is in the house of Rachel. So you have Jacob, Yaakov, marries 4 women, right? His 2 primary wives is Rachel and Leah, Rachel and Leah. The oldest son from Rachel is Yosef, is Joseph. The son that assumes responsibility and becomes sort of the king or kingship or royalty is eventually bestowed upon him is Yehuda, is Judah. So we have 2 concepts of Mashiach, and we'll explain what that means. There are 2 concepts of Mashiach. There's Mashiach from the house of Rachel, from Rachel, and there's Mashiach from the house of Leah. One is Ben David, one is a child of David, and one is a child of Yosef. Let's go back to the biblical narrative, what exactly occurs with Jacob. When Jacob, the first time he meets Rachel, what happens when the first time he meets Rachel? He sees her, and she's very beautiful externally. He falls in love with her, and he wants to marry her. Instant love. And he's immediately attracted to her, and he wants to be with her. This is what the simple narrative is. Because she's Yifas Torah, Yifas Mara, she's very beautiful. Her son, Yosef, is described the same way. That he's overtly, externally very beautiful man. And everyone is immediately attracted to him. He has a certain type of charisma, a certain type of chen, that everyone is immediately attracted to his leadership. Leah, on the contrary, is described in the Torah as Ve'ena Leah Rakes, that the eyes of Leah were weak. However, the Targum, which is a translator of the Torah, says weak, but it says Yain. Ve'ena Leah Yain is that they were beautiful, but it's a different type of beauty. That the beauty of Leah is a mysterious beauty, is a hidden beauty, and the beauty of Rachel is a revealed beauty. And this will become a very important structure, a Kabbalistic structure, which is that there's 2 types of reality. There's the reality as we know it and as we observe it, the reality as it is, and then there's the reality of what will become. The reality as what is what's presented to us. This person looks this way, this person looks this way, this is the observed reality. This is the description of Rachel and the description of Yosef. This represents Mashiach ben Yosef, which means Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah from the house of Joseph, is the Mashiach of the reality of the present. Then there's Mashiach ben David, which is the reality of the dream of the future, which is not revealed yet, which is what we hope for, what we dream for, what we're creating. It's a different type of reality. So you look at this in the world and you say, okay, this is the world that it is, and we can make dues, whatever that is. That's a Mashiach ben Yosef reality. Mashiach ben David reality is to have the dream and say, well, that's just the way it is now, but we can actually create a better world, a better society. So that's the dream. It's not beautiful overtly, but it will become beautiful through the work, or through the unfolding. And this is actually, if you think about it, this is the difference between these 2 characters, between Joseph and Yehuda, is that Yosef, his life is, you can't really call it smooth because he has a lot of turbulations in his life, and he's sold into slavery and everything else. He's put into a pit. There's a lot of difficult things that he has to withstand. But Yosef is a person that never complains. You don't actually hear his voice when he's thrown to the pit, at least in the way the Torah describes it. He's never complaining. He's just quiet, and he's allowing everything to just happen to him because he's just the way things are. That's okay. Whatever the situation is, it's okay. The one time he does complain is when he was in prison in Egypt, but that's like out of character. He never complains, and this is the way his reality is. Yehuda, if you follow the narrative of Yehuda is actually the opposite type of character. Yehuda is a person that constantly is in a state of struggle, and he's constantly overcoming. He has huge temptations, and he goes through very strange episodes in the Torah, but he's always trying to fight for his rights. He's always trying to do just. Even when his brother is sold into slavery, and he takes responsibility, and he takes responsibility for Benjamin, and he's always fighting, and always he's pushed down, and he always gets up. Which means that he represents a person that even though he's being crushed, he always has the ability to stand up again. Therefore, he represents Mashiach ben David, from the house of David, because that is, even though the world doesn't appear to be in a perfect state, and it's far from perfect, Yehuda says, no, we have to plow forward, we have to move forward, we have to have a dream, we have to have a vision, and we can create, and it should be revealed, a higher dimension of reality. So that's the aspect of Yehuda. And this is correspondingly, this represents the two movements of the letter Nun. That the letter Nun means, we said, the word Nefilah, which is to fall. So he's falling. But the final letter Nun, which is when you spell the letter Nun, it's spelled Nun Nun, is a straight line. So the way the Talmud says is that the letter Nun, the falling Nun, represents a person that's falling and struggling and being challenged, and the straight Nun represents someone that's straightening himself out. So someone that does fall, there's some bones that's always straight, and there's some people that fall and get up and fall and get up and fall and get up. That falling and getting up is the character of not giving up, not despairing, and always believing in the possibility that something could be different. And that is Mashiach ben David. That's what we're anticipating. Yeah. So this is Nutzafit, the final one. That's the final letter. So that means that you're falling and then you're getting up. That's the Nun. When Yaakov is going to send one of his children into Egypt, which to Yaakov is obviously a demotion. He's descending into Egypt from Israel. Israel is higher, even physically and spiritually. He's descending into Egypt. Who does he send to go down into Egypt? He sends Ves Yehuda Shalach Lefan of Goshen. He sends Yehuda to go down to Goshen. The numeric value of the word Goshna is the same numeric value as the word Nachash, a snake, and the same numeric value of the word Mashiach. Because he has the power to go down into Goshen, into Egypt, into a place of constriction, and from there to get up. Okay. So this is the general concept of a nun in its proper formation. Which means a nun in proper formation is that even though you're full, you get up. Which incidentally is also related to a meditative practice, because the spine is what connects the brain to the lower part of the body. Now, the sages in the Talmud say something it's a cryptic statement. It says that when you bow down for modim is a certain passage in the prayer, that you submit and you humble yourself and you acknowledge and you're thankful. Okay, so we'll use the word just thankful, when you're thankful. So it says that when you bow down for modim, you have to bow until the bones of the vertebrae show. So you bow down and you can see it in the back. And if not, it says that the bones will turn, the spine will turn into a snake. Okay, that's what it says. This is one passage. Another teaching says like this, that when you bow down for modim, when you're bowing your head, you have to bow in a way that you show the vertebrae and you drop. Okay, so your head drops. But then when you move upwards, so you bow, you're bowing in acknowledgement and being grateful and thankful. But when you're moving up your head, you have to move it like this, straight up, and you move like that, as if... Correct, but you're moving the way a snake gets up. Kinachash. Okay. So what you're doing is you drop, and then you get up like a snake. So here we have a very interesting image, because on one hand, it's saying that if you don't bow down, then your spine turns into a snake, which would appear that a snake is something that's not necessarily positive. On the other hand, we're saying, but when you bow down, you have to get up like a snake. So the actual movement is that snake energy, nachash energy, and that's also part of the story in the Torah, in the beginning of the Torah, is that Nachash is also Eros, and it also represents physical temptations, particularly connected to the bottom of the spine, which is the lower part of the body, the expression of the lower part of the body, which is the attribute of Yesod, the procreative organ. So the top of the brain is connected this way, so it's from here to here. Okay, now the movement, there could be a movement of two directions of spinal energy. You can have movement that goes from the bottom of the spine, moving upwards into the brain, into the brain. This is one movement, which incidentally is some forms of Kundalini meditation, but I'm not going to get into it, which you're bringing up spinal energy upwards, and that in itself is an expansiveness, but it's actually a very physical thing because it's just basically sexual energy. And then what the Talmud is saying and what the sages are saying is actually the reverse. That what you have to do, and this is the way it's actually described in the teachings of the Ari. In the teachings of the Ari, what you're doing when you're bowing down is you're taking your moyach, which is your mind, and you're bringing down the energy through your spine, and you're bowing down all the way down that your head is positioned towards your attribute of Yesod, or at least in that direction, so you're moving downwards. You're bringing down the energy in the reverse. First you're bringing down mind, and the energy is flowing down. Once there's a movement from the head to the lower part of the body, the lower part of the body is not a negative thing. It's just when it's uncontrolled and there's no mind, there's no moyach, then it can be something that's misdirected and it's not expressed properly. However, when it's done through the mind, then you actually have to bring it up. So what you do is first you move downwards through submission. You're moving your head downwards to the attribute of Yesod. So you're moving the mind towards the lower part of the body, which is the lower part, which is the snake. Okay, so the spine represents that snake energy, but it's moving downwards. Then when you finish the moedim, then you're moving it upwards. So you're moving from the bottom part of the spine up to the brain. So you have to bring up that energy, which means that the concept of nachash, the concept of nun, which is the snake, is not something that negative has to be let go, but it has to be included. It's just not, the movement shouldn't be from the lower to the top, but it should be first top down. The movement goes down the spine, then it moves up. Now if you don't bow down for moedim, which means if there's no submission, which means there's no movement from the head to the lower part of the body, then the way the sages phrase it is that the spine turns into a snake, which means, and the snake is connected with the tree of knowledge. And what is a tree of knowledge? A tree of opposites, and opposites means death, right? Because the opposite of life is death, and the opposite of death is life. So it means that the spine turns into dissolves. And this is the teaching that the Talmud talks about in terms of the resurrection of the dead. Because if the spine is completely transformed into a snake, which means that it enters into the tree of knowledge, then there's no possibility for the tree of life, which is the resurrection. That's the movement. So you're moving from the top to the bottom, and then from the bottom you're bringing it up. Okay, so this is the healthy movement of the letter Nun. Getting back, so what we're saying is that the letter Nun, there's the regular Nun, which is the bent Nun, and then you're moving into the straightened out Nun. So it represents that you're bowing down, you're moving downward, and then you're not giving up, there's no despair, you're moving upwards. Now the moving upwards, again, also internally represents the bringing up of the energy upwards. And that's actually the transformation of Nachash into Mashiach. Okay, that's redemption. That's ultimate redemption, where we can include every single aspect of our body into this perfection, into the tree of life. Now, when we look at the letters Nun, and then we say that there's two Nuns, one after the next, but there's no final Nun, which means that there's no straightening out of Nun. So that's Nefila Basa Nefila. That's a fall after a fall. Now we also said that Nun means to get to a point where you're effortless, right? We said it's like a fish that's floating in water. It's like a person that reached 49 and reached the 50th gate of wisdom, first gate of understanding, and they're free and they're effortless. You get through a challenge and you're ready in a perfect state. So what type of fall do you experience if you're floating effortlessly? You understand? Yeah, what kind of Yerida? What kind? So let's try to get through and then we'll ask questions. What kind of falling do you experience when you reached a certain plateau? So let's say, for example, you're struggling with anger. Let's just give a very broad example. And you went to many anger management classes, and you learn the material, and you're completely very peaceful, and that's it. That you reach. I don't know if it's possible. Let's say you reach a point of complete equilibrium, and you never become angry. So you reach reached a certain plateau. What is the nefila? What's the possibility of the fall? That would be a fall after a fall. And the answer is very simple. The fall after a fall is when you're trying to overcome a certain obstacle, whatever the obstacle it is. It could be a physical obstacle, an emotional obstacle, a spiritual obstacle, a mental obstacle, and you see this is a challenge. I have to get over this obstacle, and so you realize that every problem is really just another opportunity for growth, another opportunity to learn, and this is another step in getting upwards. And then you recognize that sometimes you have to crouch down to jump higher, and all that movement. Okay, fine. And then you finally, but it's very clear that there's a challenge that's presented to you. Whatever the challenge is, this is the hurdle that you have to overcome. You focus on it, and you say you don't want to be like the nun that falls. You want to be a nun that gets up. So you get down, and you say, I'm going to get up, and that's really to experience an inner form of redemption, right? The inner Mashiach, the inner quality of Mashiach is that concept of never despairing, never saying, okay, that's it, forget it, that's it, my life is over, or this aspect of my life is completely over, because I've tried, and I keep on falling, and I just give up. Okay, it could be relationships, or job, whatever it is, spiritually, whatever you say, okay, I can't learn Hebrew, any topic that you say, I try to do it, it didn't work, just have to give up. But that's not really getting up from the nun, that's just falling and despairing. And the real way of living is to say, okay, I fall and I get up, and I get up again, and I'm going to be like Yehuda. What's the type of fall that we can experience once we reach a certain plateau in our life is routine. And routine is actually even a bigger challenge than anything else. Because if I know that this is a hurdle that I have to overcome, okay, let's say it's a simple thing. Let's say it's learning Hebrew or starting a relationship and so on. And I know, okay, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, and this is my goal, and there's obstacles, and I try this, I try that, but I keep it, this is my focus, this is my trajectory. Okay, now I finally achieve it, and I'm in a relationship, in a very healthy relationship, I'm married with children, everything's fine. What is the problem now? The problem is, stagnation. And the stagnation comes because it's routine. Okay, so it's day in, day out, you got it. Okay, and then you end up being, which the way the Torah likes to define this is a backwards nun. Now, what it means is a backwards nun. It's like a dead fish. That from the outside, if you look at a stream of water, and there's a fish swimming upstream with the water, right, and it's also flapping, its fins and scales, whatever, and it's moving. From the outside, a dead fish and a live fish looks the same thing. They're both floating upstream, right? But one is alive and one is not. One has reached a point of routine and they're just floating and they're just dead. There's no passion, there's no desire, just movement. The other one is constantly growing, but we'll have to figure out how that happens. Now, if we look at the story of the Torah, where does the Torah insert these two opposite nuns? Right after the story is that immediately following the final nun is the story that the people were complaining that they didn't have any meat to eat. Okay, so they're sitting in the desert, and in the desert, however we're going to understand this, but in the desert, they're eating man. Now the way to eat man is that the manna is available to everybody. Every person experiences the manna. There's a very little, minuscule amount of work in order to produce it. You don't have to go through some process of cooking, or maybe you do a little bit, but you don't have to go through, plucking it from a tree or slaughtering it, whatever the process is in order to create it. It's a very simple process. It's there. It's available. And it has every taste. Any taste that you wish, the manna tastes like. The image of man is the image of a mother's milk. That's the best possible image. And Moses himself, when he talks about the people in the desert, he says that I have been like a wet nurse offering them milk, like carrying them throughout these years in the desert. Which is, they have everything they need, just like a child that has good parents, and the parents are taking care of the child. The manna just becomes a metaphor of everything that a little kid has. A 3-year-old child, it has a shelter, and has warmth, and has clothes, and has food, and the kid never has to worry about like what's going to be for supper. The mother prepares supper or whatever. Someone prepares a supper, and the supper is there. He never thinks about what's going to be for dinner, or how they can go to sleep, and what's going to be with the electric bills. Everything is fine. Okay, this is the reality of the people in the desert. But the people in the desert complain, and what do they say? That we want to have meat. Want to have meat, but the truth is they did have meat because the man tastes like meat. But they weren't. That was not enough for them. They wanted to have something new. They were tired of the routine. It was too accessible. It was too available. It was a milk reality, and they wanted a meat reality. A meat reality is a longer process, and it desires, taiva desires, passion and desire, and to create it. They wanted to enter into that world, and they said that we were tired of just being served exactly what we want at any time of the day. This is what they were tired of. So they really, on a deep level, they were tired of being just in the routine. They finally reached the plateau. They left Egypt. They were redeemed. They reached a place of perfection. They're in the desert. They're receiving the milk. And they said, but it's not enough. We want to struggle. Or we want something new. It's like a person that says, I'll just give you a very trivial example, but it's not actually trivial. Let's say a person is seeking to have a relationship, and after many years, they finally find the right one, and they settle down with this person, and they're living their 10 years happily married, and this is the person. Then all of a sudden, the person starts looking around, looking for other things. Why? Because it becomes routine. So what do they think? If I'm going to get another person, you're going to be sad. Well, you're not. That's not the problem. The problem is you're trying to fill a gap, an emptiness that you have because of the routine with some new excitement. So the people they had milk, and I was like, okay, let's get a new excitement. Let's go through, and let's slaughter animals or something. Let's do something. But that's not going to help. So what actually helps? Or a person wants to make money. They make money, and they say, okay, if I make, $1 million, I'll be happy. But it's not true. They make $1 million, and they want more, and they want more. When are you going to be happy? They say, okay, I need 10 pairs of shoes. You buy 10 pairs of shoes, and say, no, but I need 11. I mean, it's not my problem, but I'm sure people have that problem. So you have to know, like, how do you say, when do you say that it's enough? That even in the routine, when you're in the routine and you finally reached a certain plateau, and how do you break open to a certain sense of freedom that you don't get into the rut of just the routine and you feel like your life is boring. So we can go back to the idea of the nun and the nun. The nun and the nun is a regular nun and a final nun. Now we said that the regular nun and the final nun means a person that's falling and a person that is standing up. Okay, that has a position that is standing up. The letter nun, we said, also has the numeric value of the word 50. So 50 and 50 is 100. Now the Ari writes, and other Kabbalists write, that when we talked about before about moedim, that we have to bow, right? And we say we have to bow down, and then the spine will not turn into a snake. But then we have to elevate and come through a snake and bring up the snake energy upwards. The word moedim in numeric value is actually 100. Mem Daled Yud Mem in numeric value is 100. What is moedim? Moedim means to be grateful and thankful. And this is the simple and most true thing about life. That whenever you achieve certain goals, if you're trying to achieve the certain goal, and there's an obstacle and you're trying to achieve it, okay, that it's very clear, you have to struggle, you have to overcome, and you overcome, you persevere. If you have already achieved what you want, and you now find yourself in the routine, you have to make sure that you're constantly being grateful, because nothing is actually routine, and nothing you should take for granted. It's your health, and your happiness, and your wealth, and your relationships. There's nothing actually in life is routine. Just because the sun rose, the sun set yesterday, doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. And we have to be thankful for it. So what the Torah is saying is that if we experience moedim, which is acknowledgement and submission, and being grateful, that ensures that nothing in life becomes routine. So even the things that are routine, and okay, we achieved it, we have it. You have to be grateful and be grateful and be grateful again. And that's how you really reveal on the deepest level the inner Mashiach, because there are two types of struggles, like we said. There's one is the challenge that's very overt, it's a very clear struggle, and there's one is the daily grind of life. It's day in, day out, you're doing the same thing. Okay, so where's my passion, where's my desire? Okay, I have what I need and what I want, but I don't have any longer any desire, and I want that. It's like the people complaining that we have the man, but we want to have meat. We want desire. And to break that is to have moedim. And that's why there's another teaching that's found in the Talmud, which ties everything together. The Talmud says that Bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lasses Chizkiya Mashiach, that Chizkiya, one of the characters, one of the kings of Israel, God said, I would actually like Chizkiya to become Mashiach. He's perfect, he's reached a very high spiritual plateau, he's redeeming the world, he's on a spiritual level, and a perfect person, perfect candidate to be the Mashiach. And I said, like we said before, it's important to understand that we all have aspects of Mashiach. We're talking about the collective, the individual as well. And it says that he does not become Mashiach, this particular person, because he was not grateful and he was not thankful. That's the problem. Yes, you reach a very high spiritual plateau, but if you get to a place where you just see your life as routine, and whatever it is in your life, even your health and things that you take completely for granted, if you're not grateful, then you end up actually descending. That's the deeper type of nefila, of falling. It's not the falling that's very clear to you. Falling that's very clear to you is like you're struggling to get up and you say, okay, this is a big challenge, and you're struggling. It's clear. This is a struggle, this is a challenge, this is something that you're falling. The more subtle falling is the falling of the daily routine. And then 2 years later you look back and you're completely depressed, and you don't know why, because you just got into this routine and this rut, and it's day in, day out in the same type of behavior, and everything externally seems to be perfect. It's exactly what you wanted, and your life seems to be, you're with the perfect person, and you have your health, and you have financially everything's fine, and spiritually everything's fine. It seems to be everything that you desire in your life is actually materializing. But somehow, if you don't take an inventory and continuously be thankful, you'll find yourself in a year, 2, 3 years from now looking back and saying, wait a second, I don't feel meaning, I don't feel purpose, and looking elsewhere to fill your life with some type of excitement. It can be this thing, that thing, or the other thing, but it's always going to be something external to you. And to wait to overcome this type of more subtle form of falling is to constantly be grateful and thankful.